I stood frozen in the hallway of what should have been my home, staring at strangers unpacking boxes in my living room. The key had turned in the lock, but nothing else was familiar. Stunned, I called my daughter Melanie, who arrived 30 minutes later with her husband Travis. Instead of explanations, they laughed. "Looks like you are homeless now, Mom," Melanie said with a smirk. Their cruel laughter echoed as realization dawned. They had sold my home without permission while I was enjoying Aspen. But beneath my shocked exterior lay a secret they had overlooked, one that would turn their smug victory into the biggest mistake of their lives. I never imagined my own daughter could betray me so completely. At 68, I had worked my entire life to build security and independence. After growing up in a small town in Ohio with parents who struggled to make ends meet, I had promised myself I would create a different future. Through determination and countless sleepless nights, I had climbed the corporate ladder at Jenkins Financial, eventually becoming one of their top investment bankers. My penthouse on the Upper East Side represented 40 years of hard work. Every morning, I would wake up to stunning views of Central Park, reminding myself how far I had come. Frank, my husband of 39 years, and I had purchased it as a symbol of our success. When he passed away from heart failure 5 years ago, the penthouse became even more precious to me. It was filled with memories of our life together, from dinner parties with colleagues to quiet evenings watching the city lights. Melanie had always been a challenging child, bright but stubborn. She resented my long work hours during her childhood. When Frank and I divorced briefly during her teenage years before reconciling 2 years later, she blamed me entirely. Despite paying for her education at NYU and helping her start her interior design business, there remained a distance between us that I could never quite bridge. "Mom, you always chose your career over family," she would say during our arguments. I tried explaining that my career had given her privileges I never had growing up, but she never seemed to understand the sacrifices I had made. When she met Travis Coleman at 36, I had concerns immediately. He was charming and good-looking, but something about him felt off. His business card listed half a dozen ventures, from real estate development to cryptocurrency investment, but he never seemed to have concrete achievements. Still, Melanie was smitten, and they married after just 6 months of dating. "He makes me feel alive, Mom," she had said defensively when I suggested they might be moving too quickly. "Not everyone wants to analyze every decision like you do." Over the 6 years of their marriage, my concerns proved valid. Travis jumped from one business scheme to another, each time convinced he was about to make millions. Melanie funded his ventures from her successful interior design business, and I watched with growing worry as her own finances became strained. Whenever I gently tried to broach the subject, she would shut down the conversation. "Travis is just a visionary," she would say. "Big success requires big risks." When my friend Judy invited me for a month-long vacation at her Aspen property, I hesitated at first. I had never been away from my home for that long. But after a particularly tense dinner with Melanie and Travis, where he had aggressively pitched me on investing in his latest scheme, a chain of virtual reality arcades, I decided some distance might be good. "Take some time for yourself, Wanda," Judy encouraged during our weekly bridge game. "The mountains will do you good, and your penthouse will be waiting when you return." Before leaving, I reluctantly gave Melanie my spare key, just in case of emergency, I told her, to water the plants and check the mail. She had hugged me at the airport with what seemed like genuine affection, telling me to enjoy myself. The vacation had been wonderful. Judy and I hiked the easier trails, attended local art exhibitions, and enjoyed long conversations over wine. Being away from the city had given me perspective, and I had even started thinking about ways to rebuild my relationship with Melanie. On my second-to-last day in Aspen, I was browsing through social media when my stomach dropped. There on Melanie's Instagram were photos of her and Travis hosting what looked like an open house in my penthouse. Her caption read, "Exciting new chapter for a beautiful property." In the background, I could see strangers examining my living room, my art collection, even opening my kitchen cabinets. I called immediately, but the call went to voicemail. My text messages went unanswered. Panic rising, I booked an early flight back to New York, cutting my vacation short by 2 days. Now here I stood, in the hallway outside what had been my home for decades, faced with the ultimate betrayal. "What do you mean, homeless?" I asked. My voice barely a whisper as I stared at my daughter and her husband standing in the hallway of my building. Travis stepped forward, towering over me with his 6'2" frame. His normally perfectly groomed appearance seemed slightly disheveled, with dark circles under his eyes. "Exactly what it sounds like, Wanda. We sold the penthouse, closed the deal yesterday." "You cannot do that," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I never signed any papers. That property is in my name only." Melanie exchanged a glance with Travis before responding. "Actually, we had power of attorney, Mom. Remember signing those papers back in February when you had that bad flu?" I shook my head firmly. I never signed any power of attorney. Never. But even as I said it, a cold feeling spread through my chest. Those documents I had quickly signed when Melanie brought soup and medicine during my illness. Had I been that careless? "Look," Travis said, checking his expensive watch impatiently. "The deal is done. The new owners are moving in today. They got a great deal on the place, considering the market." "A great deal?" I repeated numbly. "What does that mean? What did you sell my home for?" Melanie at least had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. $1.8 million. I gasped. The penthouse was worth at least $3 million in the current market. You undersold by over $1 million? Why would you do that? This was when Travis's facade cracked slightly, revealing a flash of what looked like desperation. We needed to close quickly. There were some financial matters that required immediate attention. I looked between them, understanding dawning. "Your latest business venture failed again, didn't it, Travis? And this time it was bad enough that you stole my home to cover it." Travis's face hardened. "I had some outstanding debts that needed settling with people you don't want to know about, 1.2 million to be exact, people who don't take no for an answer." "Gambling debts?" I asked, the pieces falling into place, the nervous energy, the desperate need for cash, the quick sale. "Business investments," he corrected sharply. "High-stakes business that hit a temporary setback." Melanie put her hand on his arm. "Mom, we did what we had to do. Travis was in danger. These people made threats." I turned to my daughter, searching her face for any sign of the child I had raised. "And what about me, Melanie? Where am I supposed to go?" Travis shrugged dismissively. "You can stay with us for a while. We have that guest room." "How generous," I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice, "letting me stay in a room in my daughter's house after you stole my home." "We didn't steal anything," Melanie snapped, color rising in her cheeks. "We made a difficult decision in an emergency situation. And frankly, Mom, you are getting older. We've noticed some concerning behaviors lately." I stared at her in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" Travis nodded solemnly. "The forgetfulness, the confusion sometimes. We've been worried about early signs of dementia. It's partly why we made this decision. The penthouse was too much for you to manage alone." The calculated cruelty of this lie stunned me into momentary silence. They had not only stolen my home, but were now attempting to gaslight me about my mental faculties. "We've told everyone you decided assisted living would be better," Melanie added. but we wanted to give you the option to stay with us first, out of consideration." "Out of consideration," I repeated hollowly. A strange calm settled over me. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me break down. "I see." Travis checked his watch again. "Look, we need to get going. Do you want to grab some of your personal items before the new owners finish moving in? They said you could take clothes and personal effects." "How charitable of them," I said. I noticed a neighbor watching our exchange from down the hall, concern evident on her face. I straightened my posture, determined not to create a scene. "Yes, I would like to collect some things." They escorted me into what had been my home for decades. The new owners, a young couple with a small child, looked uncomfortable as I silently gathered some clothes, photo albums, and a few pieces of jewelry into suitcases. Most of my belongings were still there, now the property of strangers. "We need to go, Mom," Melanie said after 20 minutes. "The Andersons need to settle in." The Andersons. They had names. They had already made this their home while I had been enjoying mountain air in Colorado. I followed Travis and Melanie to their car in a daze. The drive to their brownstone in Brooklyn was silent. They lived in Park Slope, in a home I had helped them with the down payment for as a wedding gift. Another act of generosity that now felt like a mockery. "The guest room is made up," Melanie said as we entered their home. "Bathroom is across the hall. We will have dinner at 7. I nodded wordlessly, wheeling my suitcases to the small room at the back of the house. Once alone, I sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing tears to fall silently. Decades of hard work. Gone in an instant. My sanctuary, my memories of Frank, all taken by my own child. After composing myself, I decided to check my financial situation. If they had sold my home, what else might they have done? I opened my banking app on my phone, entering my password with shaking fingers. My heart stopped. My main checking account, which should have contained over $300,000, showed a balance of $826. A series of large withdrawals had been made over the past 3 weeks, all while I had been in Aspen. They had not only sold my home at a massive discount, but had drained my primary bank account as well. I was, essentially, destitute. I sat back on the bed, a strange calm replacing my shock. They thought they had taken everything from me. They thought I was defeated, but they had made a critical error in their calculations. They had underestimated me completely. Life in Melanie and Travis's guest room was a study in humiliation. The room itself was small, barely fitting a twin bed and dresser, with boxes of Travis's business materials stacked in one corner. The message was clear. I was an inconvenience, not a guest. "Mom, could you handle the laundry today?" Melanie would ask each morning before leaving for her design studio. Not a request, but an expectation, as if I had become their unpaid housekeeper overnight. Travis worked from home on his latest venture, something involving social media marketing that he spoke about in vague, grandiose terms. He would emerge from his office periodically to check on me, as if ensuring I wasn't stealing the silver. "Finding everything okay, Wanda?" he would ask, with that tight smile that never reached his eyes. "Need any help figuring out the washing machine? I know technology can be confusing at your age." The constant implications about my mental acuity were perhaps the most galling. Travis would repeat instructions slowly, loudly, as if speaking to someone with diminished capacity. When I made minor mistakes, like misplacing my reading glasses, they were treated as significant events, proof of my supposed decline. "See what I mean?" Travis would say to Melanie. "Good thing we stepped in when we did." I played along, allowing a slight tremor in my hands when they watched, occasionally pretending to forget small details or appearing confused by simple technologies. Every fiber of my being wanted to confront them, to rage against their betrayal, but strategy overruled emotion. If they believed me defeated and diminished, they would become careless. At night, I would lie in the unfamiliar bed, planning my next moves with the methodical precision that had made me successful in banking. First, I needed allies. Then, information. Finally, leverage. One afternoon, while Melanie was at work and Travis was on a conference call behind closed doors, I made my first move. I called Scott Nielsen, a former colleague who had become one of New York's top real estate attorneys. We had worked together for 15 years at Jenkins Financial, and he had handled Frank's estate after his passing. Wanda. What a pleasant surprise. His familiar voice came through my phone, which I had taken to the small backyard to ensure privacy. "How's retirement treating you?" "Not well, Scott," I admitted, keeping my voice low. "I need your help, and I need absolute discretion." I explained the situation, laying out the facts without emotion. The unauthorized sale, the drained accounts, the false claims about my mental state. Scott's voice turned hard. "Wanda, this is elder abuse, fraud, and theft. We need to go to the authorities immediately." "Not yet," I cautioned. "I need to understand exactly what they've done and gather evidence first. If they've forged my signature or falsified documents, I want to know the full extent before making any moves." Scott agreed reluctantly. "I'll start investigating the sale. If they filed power of attorney documents, I can find them. And Wanda, don't confront them yet. If what you're saying is true, these are desperate people who have already shown they'll go to extreme lengths." That evening at dinner, I observed Travis and Melanie with new eyes. My daughter picked at her food, dark circles under her eyes suggesting sleepless nights. Travis, meanwhile, checked his phone constantly, his jaw tightening each time. "Problem with work?" I asked innocently. "Nothing I can't handle," he snapped, then forced a smile. "Just some investors getting antsy about returns. Standard business stuff." Later, I heard them arguing behind their bedroom door. "They want the rest by Friday," Travis hissed. "The sale money is gone, Melanie." "What exactly do you suggest I do?" "I don't know. This was supposed to fix everything." Melanie's voice cracked. "You said once we paid them the $1.2 million, we would be clear." "Well, interest accrues," Travis said bitterly. "And they've decided the terms have changed." Their voices lowered, and I couldn't make out the rest. But one thing was clear. Travis's dangerous people were still in the picture, and the money from my penthouse hadn't resolved the situation as they'd planned. The next day, I took a risk. While doing the laundry as assigned, I deliberately misplaced one of Travis's expensive shirts. When he confronted me about it, I appeared confused and distressed. "I'm sorry, I thought I put it in the blue basket," I said, wringing my hands. "Everything's so different here." Travis sighed dramatically. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. Melanie and I need to discuss more permanent arrangements for you." As I had hoped, my apparent confusion prompted them to speak more freely around me, as if I couldn't fully comprehend their conversations. That evening, I overheard Travis on the phone in his office, the door ajar. "Lauren, I need you to process this withdrawal immediately," he said urgently. "Yes, I know it's irregular, but I have the signed authorization. Look, do you want me to mention to bank management how you helped with those mortgage applications last year? The ones with the adjusted income statements?" The name caught my attention. Lauren Keller had been Melanie's friend since college and now worked at First National Bank, the same bank where my accounts were held. The pieces were falling into place. Travis had leveraged Lauren somehow, possibly blackmailing her to assist with accessing my accounts. Through careful eavesdropping and strategic confused elderly moments, I pieced together more of their scheme. Travis had accumulated gambling debts to a casino in Atlantic City, not to shadowy criminals as he'd claimed to Melanie. He had convinced her that dangerous people were threatening him, playing on her fears to make her complicit in stealing from me. The most shocking discovery came 3 weeks into my stay, when I was searching for a spare light bulb in Travis's home office during his lunch meeting in the city. In a locked desk drawer that I managed to open with an old trick Frank had taught me, I found documents for a property management company called TC Luxury Properties, with Travis listed as the sole owner. Further digging revealed the truth that made my blood run cold. The buyer of my penthouse was actually a shell company connected to TC Luxury Properties. Travis hadn't just stolen my home to pay debts. He planned to renovate it minimally and flip it for its true market value of $3 million plus, pocketing the difference himself. And based on other paperwork I found, Melanie had no idea about this part of his plan. While replacing everything exactly as I had found it, I discovered something else. A small, safe contained documents for a condo in Chicago, and photos of Travis with a woman and young boy. The dates on the photos spanned the past 4 years, all during his marriage to Melanie. Travis Coleman had another family. That night, I lay awake planning my next moves. I needed to act carefully. I had the beginning of leverage, but not enough yet, and I needed to determine if Melanie was a willing accomplice or another of Travis's victims. The next morning, I received a text from Scott. Found the power of attorney. Signature is an obvious forgery. Also, good news. The penthouse sale is still in escrow, not fully completed. We have a small window to act, a glimmer of hope. But I needed more before making my move. "Wanda, you look well," my friend Judy said, as we met at a small cafe 6 blocks from Melanie and Travis's house. I had told them I was going for a doctor's appointment, and they had been too preoccupied with their own problems to question me further. Judy had flown in from Aspen immediately after my call. At 72, with her silver hair cut in a stylish bob and decades of experience as a corporate litigator before retirement, she was exactly the ally I needed. "I am far from, well," I admitted once we had ordered coffee. "But I am getting clearer about what needs to be done." I updated her on everything I had discovered, including Travis's second family and the shell company he had created to flip my penthouse. "That absolute snake," Judy said, her lawyer's composure momentarily slipping. "And Melanie? Do you think she knows about Chicago?" I shook my head. "I don't believe so. She seems genuinely frightened about these supposed dangerous creditors. Travis has manipulated her fear to make her complicit. That doesn't excuse what she did to you," Judy pointed out. "No," I agreed, "but it might explain it. I need to understand if there's anything left to salvage with my daughter after this is over." Our conversation was interrupted by my phone ringing. It was Scott. "Wanda, I've spoken with the escrow company," he said without preamble. "The sale is scheduled to close in 7 days. We can stop it, but we need to move quickly." "What do we need?" I asked. "Proof of the forgery, for starters. I've engaged a handwriting expert who can testify that the signature on the power of attorney isn't yours, but if we can find out who actually forged it, that would strengthen our case considerably." My mind went to Lauren at the bank. I might have a lead on that. Let me get back to you. After finishing with Scott, I turned to Judy. I need to confront someone who might have been involved in forging my signature. Are you up for a trip to First National Bank? Judy's eyes gleamed with the look I remembered from our younger days, when we were often the only women in rooms full of male executives. Try stopping me. Lauren Keller looked up from her desk in the private client services department, her professional smile freezing when she recognized me. At 38, She had been promoted quickly at the bank, partly due to her skills, and partly, I suspected, due to her willingness to bend rules for the right clients. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, using my married name. What a surprise. "How can I help you today?" "I think we should discuss that privately," I said calmly. Lauren glanced nervously around the open office space. "Of course. Let's use the conference room." Once seated in the small glass-walled room, with Judy beside me, projecting quiet authority, Lauren's composure began to crack. "I know about the withdrawals from my accounts, Lauren," I said directly, "and about the forged power of attorney." "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her trembling hands betrayed her. "Travis Coleman has been blackmailing you," I continued. "Something about adjusted income statements on mortgage applications. That's a federal offense, Lauren. But so is what you did to my accounts." Her eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand. I didn't have a choice. Travis threatened to report me. I would lose my job, go to prison. So instead you helped him steal from me," I said. "Someone you've known since college, your friend's mother." Lauren looked down at her hands. "He said Melanie was trying to help you, that you were having cognitive issues and needed assisted living, but were resistant to selling the penthouse to pay for it." The story made sense, especially when he showed me the power of attorney. "Which you knew was forged," Judy interjected sharply. Lauren nodded miserably. "The signature didn't match the one on file. I should have reported it, but Travis said it would cause trouble for Melanie, too. He said they were just trying to help you before you made financially devastating decisions." "And you believed him," I said. "I wanted to," she admitted. "It was easier than believing the alternative. And then he found out about the mortgage applications I had helped process with inflated income statements. Former clients of mine who needed larger loans than they qualified for. I falsified their documentation. Travis somehow found out." I studied her for a long moment. "I'm not here to report you, Lauren. I want your help making this right." Hope flickered in her eyes. "How?" "First, by telling me exactly what Travis asked you to do and when. Then, by being willing to testify about the forgery if necessary." She hesitated. "He would expose what I did with those mortgages." "That's a risk," I acknowledged. "But right now, you're an accomplice to fraud and elder abuse. Which do you think carries the heavier penalty?" By the time we left the bank, Lauren had provided a complete statement about her role in Travis's scheme, including dates, amounts, and details about how he had pressured her to process the withdrawals from my accounts, despite the obviously forged authorization. "Do you think she will actually testify if needed?" Judy asked as we walked away. "I think she will," I said. "She's more afraid of prosecution than she is of Travis, and she seemed genuinely remorseful." Our next stop was to meet with Scott and the private investigator he had engaged to look into Travis's activities. The investigator, a former NYPD detective named Ray Morales, had compiled a substantial file. "Mr. Coleman has been busy," Ray said, spreading photographs and documents across Scott's conference table. "The gambling debts are real, but they're to legitimate casinos, not loan sharks or criminals. He owes $1.2 million to Atlantic Palace in Atlantic City. They've been threatening legal action, not violence. So he lied to Melanie about being in danger," I said. "Completely," Ray confirmed. "And the Chicago situation is even more interesting. He has a long-term girlfriend there named Diane Foster and a 4-year-old son. He maintains a condo in Lincoln Park under his company's name and visits monthly, telling your daughter their business trips." I absorbed this information, feeling a strange combination of disgust and vindication. Travis was even worse than I had suspected. "What about his current business partners?" I asked. He keeps mentioning investors who are pressuring him. Ray nodded. That part is true. He has 3 primary investors in his latest venture, something called V-Arcade Experiences. They put in $600,000 combined, but the business is failing. The prototype arcade opened and closed within 6 months. They want their investment back. Are they dangerous people? I asked. Hardly, Ray said with a small smile. One's a dentist, one's a retired teacher, and one's a small business owner. They're just angry about losing their money. By the end of our meeting, we had assembled a complete picture of Travis's schemes, from the forged power of attorney to the shell company purchasing my penthouse to the double life in Chicago. We also had a plan. The escrow company has been notified of a potential fraudulent transaction, Scott explained. They won't close the sale without further verification now. But Travis doesn't know that yet. Good, I said. I want him to think everything is proceeding as planned. Meanwhile, I need to determine exactly how involved Melanie has been. That evening, I took a risk and asked Melanie to join me for a walk. To my surprise, she agreed. As we strolled through the neighborhood in uncomfortable silence, I carefully approached the subject. The people Travis owes money to, I began. Are they still threatening him? Melanie looked startled by the direct question. He says it's under control now, mostly. The money from the penthouse helped, but there's still some outstanding issues. What kind of people are they exactly? I pressed. She hesitated. I've never met them. Travis handles all that. He says it's safer if I don't know details. And you believe him? Melanie stopped walking, turning to face me. For a moment, I saw vulnerability break through her defensive shell. What choice do I have, Mom? He says they would hurt him, maybe even me, if the debts aren't paid. What would you do if Dad had been in that situation? Your father would never have gambled away our security, I said quietly. And he certainly wouldn't have stolen from his family to cover it up. Is that what you think happened? She asked, her voice rising slightly. That Travis gambled it all away? He made investments that didn't work out. It's different. Is it? I challenged. And was it his idea or yours to forge my signature and sell my home without my knowledge or consent? She looked away, guilt flashing across her face. We didn't have a choice. You wouldn't have understood the urgency. Try me, I said. For a brief moment, I thought she might actually open up, might recognize the magnitude of what they had done. Then her expression hardened again. You've always judged Travis. From day one, you decided he wasn't good enough. Well, he's my husband, and we're a team. We made a decision together to protect our family. By destroying mine, I said quietly. She had no answer for that, and we walked back to the house in silence. Later that night, I received a text from Scott. Everything's in place. Are you ready to move forward? I thought about what I had learned, about Travis's elaborate web of lies and my daughter's willing blindness, about how they had taken everything I had worked for without hesitation or remorse. Yes, I replied. Let's proceed as planned. Travis, these canapes are divine, gushed Sharon Peterson, wife of one of Travis's business partners. You and Melanie really know how to host. Travis beamed, playing the role of successful entrepreneur and gracious host to perfection. Wait until you try the champagne. It's a special vintage I discovered through a client who imports directly from France. I watched from my corner of the living room as Travis worked the room. He had organized this dinner party to celebrate the successful sale of my penthouse and to reassure his increasingly nervous investors about the future of his business ventures. The escrow was scheduled to close the following day, according to what Travis believed. For this occasion, he had grudgingly allowed me to join the festivities, presenting me to his guests as Melanie's mother, who's staying with us temporarily while transitioning to assisted living. The sympathetic glances from the guests made my blood boil, but I maintained my facade of slightly confused elderly mother, smiling vacantly and occasionally asking repetitive questions to reinforce their perception. Melanie fluttered around the edges of the gathering, her smile tight and eyes watchful. Over the past week, I had noticed increasing tension between her and Travis. Twice I had heard her crying behind closed doors. Once I had caught her staring at old family photos with an expression of profound loss. She was beginning to recognize the consequences of their actions, but remained loyal to Travis out of fear or misplaced love, or both. "Mrs. Thompson, would you like some more wine?" asked Mark Peterson, offering to refill my barely touched glass. "Oh, I better not," I said with a deliberately shaky laugh. "The medications, you know, makes everything fuzzy." Mark nodded with patronizing sympathy. "Of course, Travis mentioned you've been having some health challenges. It's good you have family to support you." "Yes," I agreed mildly. "Family is everything, isn't it?" The evening progressed according to Travis's carefully orchestrated plan. Dinner was served, wine flowed freely, and Travis held court, spinning tales of business opportunities and future successes. He was particularly attentive to the Petersons and the Wilsons, his primary investors who had funded the failed V-Arcade venture. The initial location was just a test run, he assured them confidently. The data we gathered was invaluable. The next phase is where the real profits begin. Around 9:30, just as dessert was being served, the doorbell rang. Travis frowned slightly, not expecting additional guests. "I'll get it," Melanie offered, rising from her seat. Moments later, she returned to the dining room, her face pale. "Travis, there are some men here to see you. They say it's urgent business." Travis's expression flickered with momentary panic before he composed himself. "Excuse me, everyone. Please enjoy the tiramisu. I'll just be a moment." As he left the room, I caught Judy's eye from across the table. She gave me a slight nod. Our plan was in motion. "Who do you think that is?" Sharon Peterson whispered loudly to her husband. "It seems rather late for business calls." Before anyone could speculate further, raised voices carried from the entryway, Travis's controlled tone alternating with deeper, angrier voices. "This is neither the time nor place," Travis was saying firmly. "I told you we would meet tomorrow after the funds clear." "We're done waiting, Coleman," came the reply. 6 months of excuses is enough." The dinner guests exchanged uncomfortable glances as 3 men in business suits entered the dining room, followed by a furious Travis and a visibly shaken Melanie. "Everyone, I apologize for the interruption," Travis said, attempting to maintain control. "These gentlemen were just leaving." "Actually, we're not," said the tallest of the 3, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair. "Since you've been dodging our calls, we thought we'd join your celebration. After all, we helped fund it, didn't we?" I recognized him from Ray's photographs as Dr. Alan Wilson, the retired dentist who had invested $200,000 in Travis's failed VR arcade. "Alan, please," Travis said, desperation creeping into his voice. "We can discuss this tomorrow." "I'm Robert Keller." The second man introduced himself to the stunned dinner guests. "Travis owes me and my partners $600,000, plus interest, for investments he misappropriated. He's been claiming for months that he couldn't repay us because dangerous criminals were threatening him over gambling debts." "That's not true," Travis protested, but his face had gone ashen. "Isn't it?" The third man stepped forward. "Because when we hired a private investigator, we discovered you've been lying about pretty much everything, including where our investment money actually went." Melanie looked at Travis in confusion. What are they talking about? You said the business failed naturally, that it was market conditions. Market conditions didn't lose your investment, Robert Keller said grimly. Blackjack tables in Atlantic City did. The dinner party had dissolved into chaos. Guests were standing, gathering purses and jackets, making hurried excuses to leave. Travis was attempting simultaneously to calm his investors and prevent his other guests from departing. Everyone, please, he pleaded. This is just a misunderstanding, a cash flow issue that will be resolved tomorrow when a real estate transaction closes. That was my cue. I stood up, abandoning my confused elderly persona entirely. The real estate transaction involving my penthouse, Travis? The one you fraudulently sold using forged documents? The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. Wanda, please, Travis said, his tone condescending despite his panic. You're confused again. Remember? We discussed the sale. You agreed it was best. Did I? I reached into my purse and removed a folder, which I handed to Robert Keller. Here are copies of the forged power of attorney documents used to sell my property without my knowledge or consent. You'll also find bank records showing systematic theft from my accounts over the past month, totaling over $300,000. Travis lunged for the folder, but Mark Peterson stepped between us. His expression hardened as he began to realize he'd been deceived as well. That's not all, I continued calmly. You'll also find documentation of a shell company called TC Luxury Properties, which is the actual buyer of my penthouse. Travis intended to renovate it minimally and flip it for its true market value of over $3 million, pocketing the difference of more than $1 million himself. Melanie gasped. What? Travis? Tell them that's not true. Travis's face had gone from pale to mottled red. This is ridiculous. She's obviously experiencing cognitive decline. Ask anyone. She's been confused, forgetful. An act, I said simply. To give you enough rope to hang yourself. The front door opened again, and Scott entered with Ray Morales and 2 uniformed police officers. Travis Coleman? One officer asked. We have some questions regarding allegations of fraud, forgery, and financial elder abuse. What happened next occurred so quickly that later accounts from the guests varied. Travis bolted toward the back door, shoving Sharon Peterson aside in his desperation to escape. He nearly made it to the back gate before Ray, with surprising speed for his bulk, tackled him to the ground. As the officers handcuffed Travis, reading him his rights while he protested loudly about mistakes and misunderstandings, I turned to face my daughter. Melanie stood frozen in the dining room doorway, her face a mask of shock and dawning horror. Mom, she whispered, I didn't know. About the shell company. About flipping the penthouse. I swear I didn't know. But you knew about selling my home without my consent, I said quietly. You knew about emptying my bank accounts. Tears filled her eyes. He said, you would be fine. That we would take care of you. That it was the only way to save us from these dangerous men who would hurt us. Men who don't exist, I said. The only debts were to legitimate businesses and the investors standing right here. As this truth sank in, Melanie's legs seemed to give way, and she sank into a dining chair. What have I done? She whispered. One of the officers approached her. Miss Coleman? We have questions for you as well. I stepped forward. Officer, if possible, I'd like a moment alone with my daughter first. He hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. We'll be just outside. When everyone had filed out, leaving Melanie and me alone in the wreckage of the dinner party, I sat down across from her. Why? I asked simply. Melanie's tears flowed freely now. He convinced me you were slipping mentally, Said small things at first, like how you seemed confused about dates or forgot conversations. I didn't really see it myself, but he was so concerned, so convincing. Then he told me about the gambling debts. Said these dangerous men would hurt him, hurt us both, if he didn't pay. He made it sound like selling the penthouse was the only option, and that you wouldn't agree because you couldn't understand the danger. And you believed him over me, I said, the hurt still raw despite everything I'd learned. He's my husband, she said softly. I trusted him completely, even enough to forge my signature, to steal my life savings. She looked down in shame. The forgery was his idea. He said it was the only way, since you wouldn't sign willingly. The money, he said we needed it for protection, for a fresh start somewhere safe after paying off these people. I studied my daughter's face, searching for the little girl I had raised, the woman I had hoped she would become. Do you know what happens now, Melanie? She shook her head miserably. Travis will be charged with multiple felonies: fraud, forgery, financial elder abuse, possibly more once they investigate fully. And you're an accomplice. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. I'll go to prison. Possibly, I acknowledged, unless arrangements can be made. Hope flickered in her eyes. What kind of arrangements? That depends on you, I said. On whether you're willing to take responsibility for your actions. On whether there's anything left between us worth salvaging. Before she could respond, the officer returned. Time's up, ma'am. We need to speak with Miss Coleman now. As Melanie was led away, still in shock, I remained seated at the dining table, surrounded by half-eaten desserts and abandoned wine glasses. The victory felt hollow, tinged with grief for what my daughter and I had lost. But beneath that grief lay a small seed of possibility. Perhaps, with time and true remorse, something could be rebuilt from the ashes of her betrayal. Judy appeared in the doorway. Wanda, are you all right? I looked up at my oldest friend and managed a small smile. No, but I will be. The following weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and difficult decisions. The fraud case against Travis moved quickly, with overwhelming evidence of his crimes. The forged power of attorney, the unauthorized bank withdrawals, and the shell company scheme provided prosecutors with a straightforward case. What surprised everyone, including Travis himself, was how quickly his carefully constructed house of cards collapsed once the first domino fell. After his arrest at the dinner party, investigators discovered that his double life in Chicago was even more complex than we had initially uncovered. He has another shell company there, Scott explained during one of our meetings, and apparently told Diane Foster, his girlfriend, that he was divorced from you, Melanie, not married to you. Melanie, who was present for this meeting under the terms of her restricted release, blanched at this information. In the 3 weeks since Travis's arrest, her transformation had been remarkable. Gone were the designer clothes and perfectly styled hair, replaced by simple jeans and sweaters, her face free of makeup, showing the strain of recent events. Was anything he told me true? She asked quietly. No one had an answer for her. The penthouse sale had been stopped successfully, and I was in the process of regaining full legal control of my property. The escrow company had cooperated fully once presented with evidence of fraud, and the Andersons, the young couple who had believed they were buying my home, were understandably upset, but ultimately relieved not to be entangled in a fraudulent transaction. My bank accounts were a more complicated matter. While the bank acknowledged that the withdrawals had been processed improperly, the money had already been spent by Travis, primarily on gambling debts, and to temporarily appease his investors. Lauren Keller had been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation, and the bank was negotiating terms to restore my funds. As for Melanie, her legal situation remained precarious. As an accomplice to Travis's crimes, she faced potential felony charges of her own. However, I had asked Scott to negotiate with the prosecutors. She made terrible choices, I explained to the assistant district attorney handling the case, a sharp young woman named Tanya Rodriguez. But I believe she was also a victim of Travis's manipulation. She's my daughter, and I want her to have a chance to make amends. After numerous discussions, an agreement was reached. Melanie would plead guilty to lesser charges, receive probation rather than prison time, and participate in a restorative justice program that included financial restitution, community service, working with elderly victims of fraud, and mandatory therapy. The most difficult conversation came when Melanie and I met with Tanya to finalize the agreement. "You understand that this is an extraordinary arrangement," Tanya said seriously. "It's only because your mother has advocated for leniency that we're considering this approach rather than pursuing maximum charges." Melanie nodded, unable to meet either of our eyes. "I understand, and I'm grateful." "Don't be grateful yet," I said, my voice firmer than it had been with her since this all began. "This isn't forgiveness, Melanie. This is an opportunity to earn back trust, to make amends, to become someone different than the person who did these things. The conditions are strict, and I expect you to fulfill every one of them." She finally looked up, tears swimming in her eyes. "I will, Mom. I promise." "Promises from you don't carry much weight right now," I said honestly. "Actions will matter more than words going forward." The terms of our personal agreement were as strict as the legal ones. Melanie would move out of the Brooklyn brownstone, which would likely be sold to help cover Travis's restitution to his investors. She would find her own apartment, support herself through her interior design business, and begin therapy immediately to understand how she had become complicit in Travis's schemes. Most importantly, she would have no contact with Travis, who was facing a minimum of 10 years in prison based on the mounting evidence against him. His request for bail had been denied due to flight risk concerns, particularly given his connections in Chicago. "He keeps calling from jail," Melanie admitted during one of our difficult conversations, "telling me it's all a misunderstanding, that he can explain everything if I'll just help him get a better lawyer." "And do you believe him?" I asked. She shook her head slowly. "No, not anymore. Each time he calls, his story changes. The Travis I thought I knew never existed." "That's the first step," I told her. "Recognizing the truth, even when it's painful." 6 weeks after the dinner party that had exposed Travis's schemes, I finally returned to my penthouse. The building management had been understanding once the situation was explained, and my neighbors welcomed me back with sympathy and support. Standing in my living room, looking out at the Central Park view I had thought I might never see again, I felt a profound sense of gratitude mixed with lingering sadness. Judy, who had remained in New York to help me through the aftermath, joined me for my first night back home. "It looks exactly the same," she observed, as we shared a bottle of wine on my terrace. "But I imagine it doesn't feel the same." "No," I admitted, "it doesn't. I keep thinking about Melanie playing in this living room as a child, Frank and I hosting dinner parties in the dining room, all those memories now tinged with what happened." "Will you stay?" Judy asked. I considered the question seriously. "I think so. This is my home, built through decades of hard work. Letting what Travis and Melanie did drive me away would be giving them a final victory." "Speaking of Melanie," Judy said carefully, "have you decided how much contact you'll have with her going forward?" This was the question I had been wrestling with most painfully. My daughter had participated in stealing my home and life savings, had been willing to write me off as mentally incompetent for her husband's benefit. The betrayal cut deeper than any pain I had experienced, even Frank's death. Yet she was still my child, the baby I had held in my arms, the little girl whose nightmares I had soothed, whose triumphs I had celebrated. Limited contact initially, I said finally. Monthly meetings, gradually increasing if she demonstrates genuine change. She has a lot of work to do to understand why she made these choices, and I have healing of my own to focus on. The next morning, I had a meeting with Scott to discuss what had become a new mission for both of us. Using a portion of my restored funds, I had decided to establish a foundation dedicated to preventing elder financial abuse and supporting its victims. The Thompson Foundation for Elder Justice, Scott said, reviewing the preliminary paperwork. It's a worthy cause, Wanda. It's personal now, I acknowledged. I was lucky. I had the resources, knowledge, and support to fight back. Many others in my position don't. Through my connections in the financial world and Scott's legal network, we had already assembled an impressive advisory board. The foundation would provide education about common scams, targeting seniors, legal assistance for victims, and advocacy for stronger protections against financial exploitation. There's one more thing, Scott said, sliding a final document across his desk. The claim against First National Bank for their role in allowing the fraudulent withdrawals. They're offering a settlement. I reviewed the figure, noting it was substantial but not excessive. I'll accept on one condition. Lauren Keller keeps her job. Scott looked surprised. After what she did, she made mistakes, I said. Serious ones. But she was also manipulated by Travis, and she ultimately helped us build the case against him. I think she deserves a second chance, with appropriate supervision. As I left Scott's office, my phone rang. It was Melanie. I hesitated before answering, still finding our conversations painful. "Mom," she said, her voice tentative. "I just wanted to let you know I found an apartment. It's small, in Astoria, but it's what I can afford now." "That sounds sensible," I said, maintaining the careful distance that now existed between us. "And I had my first therapy session yesterday," she continued. "It was hard, really hard. But I'm committed to understanding how I let things get so twisted, how I could have done what I did to you." "That's good, Melanie. It's necessary work." There was a pause before she spoke again. "I know you may never fully trust me again, Mom. I wouldn't in your position. But I want you to know I'm going to earn back whatever place in your life you're willing to give me, however long it takes." I felt tears sting my eyes as I stood on the busy Manhattan sidewalk. "One day at a time, Melanie. That's all either of us can do right now." "One day at a time," she agreed softly. As I ended the call, I felt something shift slightly within me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the first fragile seed of possibility that someday, somehow, my daughter and I might find a new way forward together. 1 year later, I stood in my penthouse living room, adjusting a vase of fresh sunflowers on the coffee table. The apartment was filled with afternoon light, highlighting the subtle changes I had made over the past 12 months. New artwork adorned the walls, the furniture had been rearranged, and Frank's old study had been converted into a home office for my foundation work. The space felt both familiar and renewed, like I did myself. "Mom, where do you want these platters?" Melanie called from the kitchen. "On the dining table is fine," I answered, still getting used to having her in my home again after so much had happened. Today marked an important milestone for both of us. The Thompson Foundation for Elder Justice was celebrating its first anniversary, and I had invited the board members, key supporters, and a few close friends to my home for a small reception, including Melanie. Her journey over the past year had been difficult but transformative. She had completed 6 months of intensive therapy, fulfilled all her community service hours working with elderly victims of fraud, and had begun slowly rebuilding her interior design business, now under her maiden name, Melanie Thompson. Most importantly, she had maintained absolute separation from Travis, even when he continued attempting to contact her from prison. His trial had ended in a 15-year sentence after additional evidence emerged of financial crimes stretching back years before their marriage. The revelation that he had defrauded previous romantic partners using similar tactics had been a painful but necessary confirmation for Melanie that she had been targeted, not simply loved. Our relationship remained a work in progress. The monthly meetings I had initially allowed had gradually increased in frequency, though always in public places at first. It was only in the past 2 months that I had invited her back to my home, and only today that she was helping host an event here. "These look wonderful," Judy commented, entering from the kitchen with a tray of appetizers Melanie had arranged. At 73, Judy remained my closest confidant and had been instrumental in helping the foundation get established. "She's trying very hard," Judy added quietly, nodding toward the kitchen where Melanie was visible arranging fruit on another platter. "Yes," I acknowledged. "She is." The doorbell rang, announcing the first guests. Over the next hour, my home filled with people united by their commitment to protecting vulnerable seniors from financial exploitation. Scott arrived with his wife, Helen, followed by several other board members, financial industry contacts who had provided initial funding, and even Tanya Rodriguez, the prosecutor who had agreed to the restorative justice approach for Melanie. "Mrs. Thompson, the Foundation's work this year has been remarkable," Tanya said as we chatted by the window. 8 legislative testimonies, that comprehensive banking protocols guide, and direct assistance to over 50 victims. You've channeled your experience into something truly impactful. "It gave me purpose during a difficult time," I admitted. "And it's Wanda, please." My gaze drifted to Melanie, who was speaking with Scott across the room. Her body language remained tentative, slightly hunched, as if still carrying the weight of her actions, but she was engaged and present in a way that showed her commitment to this new chapter. As the afternoon progressed, I found myself observing the gathering with a sense of profound reflection. A year ago, I had believed I had lost everything that mattered: my home, my financial security, my relationship with my only child. Yet here I stood, not only with those things restored, but with a new mission that gave deeper meaning to my life. Around 5 o'clock, I gently tapped a spoon against my water glass to gather everyone's attention. The room quieted as I moved to the center of the living room. "Thank you all for being here today," I began. "A year ago, I never could have imagined standing in this room, surrounded by such extraordinary people, celebrating what we've built together." I briefly recounted my own experience with financial exploitation, watching Melanie's eyes lower in continued shame as I spoke. But this wasn't about reopening wounds. "What happened to me was devastating," I continued, "but I was fortunate. I had resources, knowledge, and support that many victims don't have. The Thompson Foundation exists for those who find themselves facing these situations alone and vulnerable." I outlined our accomplishments over the past year and our goals for the future, including expanded legal clinics, a national awareness campaign, and partnerships with financial institutions to implement stronger protections. "I've learned that healing comes in many forms," I said, nearing the conclusion of my remarks. "For me, it came through turning a personal tragedy into a mission larger than myself, through reconnecting with my own strength and resilience." And I paused, looking directly at Melanie, through the difficult but essential work of rebuilding broken trust, one day at a time. Melanie's eyes filled with tears as our gazes met across the room. I'd like to thank our board members, our donors, and every person who has contributed to our work this year, I continued. But I'd especially like to thank those who stood by me during my darkest hours. Judy, who flew across the country at a moment's notice. Scott, who fought tirelessly to right the legal wrongs. And Melanie, my voice softened, who has shown tremendous courage in confronting her mistakes and working to make amends. As the gathering applauded, I saw something I hadn't witnessed in over a year, a genuine smile spreading across my daughter's face, tentative but real. Later, as the last guests departed and Melanie helped me clean up, we found ourselves alone in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher in comfortable silence. "Thank you," she said finally. "For what you said earlier, I didn't deserve that recognition." "Recognition isn't about deserving," I replied. "It's about acknowledging truth. And the truth is, you have worked hard this past year, harder than I might have in your position." She closed the dishwasher and turned to face me directly. "I think about it every day, you know. What I did to you. How I let Travis manipulate me into betraying the one person who had always been there for me, even when I pushed you away." "I think about it too," I admitted. "Not as often as before, but it's still there." "Will it always be between us?" she asked, vulnerability etched across her face. I considered the question carefully. Not between us, exactly, but it's part of our story now. We can't erase it, but we can decide what it means going forward. "What does it mean to you?" she asked softly. I reached out and took her hand, the first time I had initiated physical contact since before the betrayal. "It means that trust is precious and fragile, that we must choose carefully who we allow into our lives, that sometimes the people we love can hurt us deeply, but that doesn't necessarily mean the love itself was a mistake." Tears spilled down Melanie's cheeks. "I don't think I've ever appreciated who you are until this year, Mom. Watching you take something so painful and transform it into this foundation, seeing how you've handled everything with such dignity. I want to be more like you. Be yourself," I said gently. "Just the most honest, compassionate version of yourself you can be." We finished cleaning in silence, both processing the emotional exchange. As Melanie prepared to leave, gathering her purse and jacket, she hesitated at the door. "Would it be okay if I came for dinner next Sunday?" she asked. "Just the two of us?" I felt a small but significant shift in my heart. "I'd like that." After she left, I poured myself a glass of wine and went out to the terrace. The city lights sparkled below as darkness fell. I thought about the journey of the past year, from devastation to rebuilding, from betrayal to the first tentative steps toward reconciliation. The deepest lesson I had learned was not about the practical safeguards against financial exploitation, important as those were. It was about the resilience of the human spirit, about how even in our 70s we can reinvent ourselves, find new purpose, and yes, learn to trust again after betrayal, albeit with wiser, more careful hearts. I had lost my home and found it again. I had lost my daughter and was slowly finding a new relationship with the woman she was becoming. I had lost my sense of security and replaced it with something stronger, the knowledge that no matter what was taken from me, my essential self remained undefeated. As I sipped my wine and watched the city below, I felt at peace for the first time in many months. The future remained uncertain, as it always does. Melanie and I had a long road ahead to rebuild what had been broken, but tonight, in this moment, I was whole, I was home, and that was enough. Have you ever faced betrayal from someone you deeply trusted? How did you find the strength to move forward? I would love to hear your stories in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, Please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might find comfort or inspiration in this journey of resilience and cautious reconciliation. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you find peace and healing in your own life's challenges.